Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by BeaversEdge writer and KGO radio host TJ Mathewson. Here back on the Edge podcast. We're back following Oregon State's bye week. Beavers took last week off following the 6-2 start to the season, and now we're back in action this Friday, ESPN2. 7:30 against the Washington Huskies up in Seattle. Thanks again for listening, watching the Big Pod. Again, Brenden Slaughter joined by TJ Mathewson. TJ, what's going on, man? How are you?
Not much. Still trying to get over a bit of a cold, but looking forward to Friday. It should be a really good game to watch on TV, Brenden. Now, I understand you will be up there.
Will be.
And we'll mention the weather as we go along, but the weather conditions for Friday are not looking promising for those sitting in an open-air press box. It seems like it's going to be in the 40s. It's going to be pouring rain. And I saw wind gusts of up to 40 miles an hour perhaps as well. So that sounds like a great time to sit outside, or maybe you might be going to the game up the road about 4 hours from here. It would seem like a little bit of fun there, Brenden.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to go up in 2020 just because of the fact that the world was a little different back then. And, I didn't make the trip up there. Last time I went was 2018, which was Jonathan Smith's first year. It was his return to Seattle. I was obviously as the Beavers hired him, the fall after the fall before. And it was a rough game for Oregon State. As you know, Washington still had a lot of their big guns left over from their march to the college football playoff a couple years prior. And, Oregon State was, again, still finding their footing under Jonathan Smith. So definitely going to be a little more interesting to go up there this time because, respectfully, TJ, the last couple times I went up there in 16 and 18, Oregon State really wasn't on Washington's level. So it's going to be interesting.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah, I'm excited to go up there as a media member. I went there a handful of times in the 2000s as a fan, obviously. But being up there as a media member with, a game that potentially could determine the final standings, in what would have been the North or just kind of the pecking order, I'm stoked. But like you said, UW, I'm looking at you, just like I'm looking at Autzen Stadium, which is the same way. Ooh, just got to throw that in there real quick. They'll open up their press box so it's fully open to the elements, not as if you're going to get wet, but it's going to be pretty cold, pretty windy, and I make no bounds, TJ. I'm a spoiled media member. I like to be warm and cozy in the press box, but I'll be all right. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a blast.
I just don't really understand press boxes above the, I don't know, pick a longitude line that you to go above. That open air press boxes. Like, I know the Mariners press box is somewhat open air too, because they have similar sort of like garage door windows
right.
on their press box. Thinking of something similar, but again, it right on the water and such. It won't be the most pleasant experience. It's going to be late. It's going to be probably the coldest time of the day, and just sort of a really miserable weather atmosphere. It sounds like, but. For the play on the field, I think this levels it out immensely. So my words, Brenden, on this pod last week, that if Ben Goldbranson is going to start up in Seattle on Friday, which it sounds like he was, it sounds like he is. Jonathan Smith was on Jim Rome today and said, whether intentionally or not, it sounded slightly
like he was
intentional.
Giving away his hand a little bit. Yeah,
it sounded slightly intentional. He didn't say, "Oh, by the way, Ben Goldbranson is starting this week."
Right.
I believe his exact words were, "He's going to be playing on the road for us this weekend or something like that."
Exactly.
It sounds like he's going to start now. With this weather, it takes away the weather and the wind. I think takes away the biggest advantage UW has, which is, I think, a pretty big quarterback mismatch. I've made it a point this week to go watch some Michael Penix. And, man, that guy looks good. Holy moly.
Yeah,
he's just sits in the pocket, scans. I mean, it's not one guy. It's not a one-read offense. I mean, he's sitting back there. He can move two, and he's going read one, read two, read one,
right.
Boom. And there's not really a throw he hasn't really made. He's making throws on all three levels of the defense. And he's not picking a favorite side really either. he's just really letting it rip, and why UW has the best passing offense in college football. But the wind's gusting and it's rainy. That doesn't make for great throwing conditions, and it really sort of leans the ball the way sort of the Vegas line did. It's sort of leaning its way back towards Oregon State. I think it opened at about a touchdown. I think it opened 6.5, and it's down to 4 for Oregon State on the road.
3.5.
Yeah, or 3.5. Wow. Okay. Well, there we go. So that right there is pretty much home field advantage. So Vegas sees these two teams at about equal, which I would probably confirm these two teams are about equal on the football field this year. So it really is sort of a fascinating matchup of how it's going to be and how the Huskies are going to handle the rain versus how the Beavers are going to handle this weather.
No doubt. I think I mean, it's funny because, it feels like, I feel like I wrote this last year. I forget which game it was, but I can't remember if it actually happened, but there was an atmospheric river scheduled to hit one of the games last year. And I remember writing about it. It's almost kind of like Oregon State has to at least play through one monsoon a season, TJ. But let me put my weather cap on here. We'll go to Chief Meteorologist Slaughter over here. We'll take a look at what it's supposed to look like Saturday night. Let's see. As of now, it's supposed to be 38 degrees warm. Yum, right? Yeah.
On the water.
38 degrees warm, toasty. Winds 10 miles an hour. That's actually come down from what I saw earlier in the week, which was maybe going to be 15 to 20. Chance of rain, 80%, and rainfall expected to be about half an inch. So if that holds, and, Pacific Northwest, right? Things can, it's not very hard for something to evolve into Saturday morning or to evolve into Friday afternoon or evolve into Friday after the game. So that's going to be something interesting to watch. But if the weather comes as we expected, TJ, there's no way that Washington will be able to have the exact passing offense without any issues that we've seen from them all season, right? In some small way, they're going to be impacted. And I see that as a huge advantage for Oregon State in this matchup.
Yeah, I think so too, and it's going to be curious to see how they really adjust. I'm trying to think back to all their games, and probably the coldest weather the game they played in was last week it would have been 2 weeks ago at Cal, right? And 2 weeks, if we're thinking back 2 weeks ago, that's right after the weather turned, but really
it was
they
still
were on the road
warm
down in California. It was and it was dry down there at Cal, I think. And then the rest of their games, the ones they played at home, it's been warm and sunny and ideal passing conditions. And I don't know, you hear this a lot in the NFL, but passing as the weather gets colder just gets a little trickier. The ball doesn't, fly as straight. It's a little harder to grip. It's a little harder to catch when it's cold out and your hands are frozen as rocks.
Right.
So if UW adapts and their passing offense looks like normal, I hate this matchup for Oregon State. I honestly do. If that is the case and Michael Penix comes out and he's just chucking the ball down the field and looks like it's not affecting him at all, I think that's an issue because I'm sort of skeptical on the Beavers' ability to get to Penix behind the line. I think in pass protection, they've done a pretty good job of protecting him. And they've also done a very good job as well as not turning the ball over. I think they're, they've only lost 6 turnovers this year, which is top 6 in the whole country. Right. Which is mighty important and probably something they would need to do, something that Arizona State did when they beat UW down in Tempe, something UCLA did when they beat them also on a Friday night down at the Rose Bowl.
Right.
So it'd be something to think about. And I watched back that game down at UCLA, and that was a game where Michael Penix really was pressing a lot. It seemed like threw a couple interceptions into double coverage. And something I'd want to see the Beavers do on Saturday, and something they'll really have to sort of rattle his cage a little bit to knock him off. I don't really think you can just let him sit back there in a clean pocket and sort of survey. As good as your secondary is, they can't cover forever, and it will probably not work out well, especially with Ben Gulbranson starting. I just don't like the quarterback matchup. I think there's just too big of a gap there between the 5th year experience, I think, of Michael Penix and Ben Gulbranson starting now his 4th career game on the road in one of the more hostile environments in the whole country.
No, I think that's excuse me. I think that's a really good point. And, excuse me. I thought I had to sneeze there for a second. And, I think with the case of this particular matchup, I would see your point, TJ, but I would counter and go, Washington's passing offense has been great, but by far and away, the strength of this Oregon State football defense is that secondary. And you talk about what that secondary has been able to do this year, whether it's, for the most part, Cam Rising had one of his worser games, not really a word, but lower performancing games of the year, against the Beavers. Caleb Williams, oh my goodness, that dude struggled for, 3 3/4 quarters. And you go back, I would like to think that the last quarterback that quote unquote had their way with Oregon State was maybe Jake Haener.
I think that was the only one, really. I went back and I tried to check all the passing numbers. He was his numbers stood out opposed to the rest. I think Cam Ward got close in yards, but Cam Ward threw the ball like 55 times, and they only scored 10 points. So,
and I think more than anything with that Jake Haener game, and I think that's what you're seeing, TJ. Also, is there coincidence there? Who did Jake Haener learn how to play college ball from? Kalen
DeBoer, yeah.
Who is, up at Washington right now. So I think there's some similarities there. And I think the good news with that, TJ, is obviously, somewhere this week, Jonathan Smith had the quote, like, I can't remember if it was press conference or one of the radio shows where he was like, they look a lot like Fresno State, but with better receivers. And, and I see it because you look at Oregon State in that game. That was a shootout type game where the Beavers needed to have all the offense they could muster because – they didn't pick it up on offense. They were able to, hold Jake Haener and Fresno State to some crucial field goals that otherwise they wouldn't have won the game. Mm-hmm. And I think back, TJ, to how in the second half they were able to get pressure on Jake Haener and kind of flip the script of how comfortable they were moving the football. Yeah. And I think when you tie in the rain and conditions aspect of this weekend, the ability for them to speed up Penix's clock, I think, is going to be kind of a subplot of what we're looking at here, just because I agree with you. You can't cover forever, but if there's a strength of this Oregon State defense, it's those guys in the back end. I mean, Katan Oladapo, Ryan Cooper, Rajon Wright, Jaden Grant, Alex Austin, those 5 guys this year have been rock stars, whether it's, looking at the snap counts that we publish at BeaversEdge each week, and it's those same guys getting the majority of the snaps and a few other guys, working their way in. But those 5 guys have played just lockdown ball down there in the back end. And I think they give Oregon State, a chance to win every game. Let's look at the numbers here, TJ. You just mentioned it. UW, high-flying passing offense, 380 yards a game. But the Beavers, top half in the Pac-12, allow just 230 through the air. So is it lazy or just flat out true, TJ, to say that is the matchup that's going to determine this game?
It is, and that's why we bring it back to weather. If it was going to be a dry night, right, we're just thinking about that. I don't have the number. Brenden, do you have the number up of where the Beavers are in sacks this year? And I don't think they track
I don't have it in front of me. Let me see if
I don't know if they track pressures, but really when Oregon State, this defensive line has really gone up against some of the better pass blocking teams in the conference, with the better offensive linemen, Utah, USC, et cetera. They didn't really they got some pressure on the quarterback, but they were never ever really to get the quarterback down. I think I remember they sacked Caleb Williams one time. Cam Rising didn't really have too tough of a time, operating from the pocket and moving around a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, here's a little nugget for you to add it in. Not exactly sacks, TJ, but as you know, we get access to some Pro Football Focus stuff at BeaversEdge. Again, reason you want to be subscribed. That's premium material, so it's pretty great. And one of the things that it shows, TJ, the last 3 games have been Oregon State's best pass rushing metrics all season. After the first 5 of the season were average at best.
Yeah, and my eye test would confirm that.
Yeah, so, and actually, more specifically, the best pass rush of the year was Washington State. And I would believe that from watching that game, as they put a lot of pressure on Cam Ward. So maybe they're starting to figure out a little something there. You got a chance to talk to Isaac Hodgins today, as we're recording this podcast on a Tuesday, and he kind of talked. He didn't
have much to say today.
Talking a little bit about the defensive line and him kind of being back. I think that group as a whole, TJ, is just starting to get a little bit more cohesion. Hodgins mentioned to you right off the bat, that he feels that he's back to 100%. That's great. James Rawls, Sione Lolohea, numerous others. But I think we've seen progress in the last few weeks is what I'm getting at.
I'm just waiting for that A+ defensive game on the road, which we haven't seen. We haven't seen, right? It has not been there. Those A+ defensive games have all been at home. On the road, it's been, again, few and far between on the road. Yeah.
We'll check in USC last year, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they still gave up quite a few yards in that game.
That's true.
If I go back and remember, right?
Yeah.
But I just want to see this unit on the road, make a difference. Not the secondary, the whole group make a difference on the road. Because if this is sort of like a Fresno State script, Brenden, will the Beavers win this game? I don't think so. If it's that much. I mean, I remember in the second half against Fresno State, you mentioned they were getting more pressure. They're also blitzing a lot. And I remember one key, I think third or fourth down late in the game where they send, I think, 8 guys at Hainer to try and get him to the ground. And he hangs in there for just long enough and then hits his guy on a slant all the way inside the 5. And that's something Michael Penix could do. Michael Penix is probably a top 5 passer in the whole country. If I were to get, if you were to, pull some NFL execs or guys who just watch the game, I don't think that's really a stretch to say in this system that he is really that good. And if the Beavers end up having to send 7 guys to get to him, I think that's going to be a little bit of trouble against a team that is really just creative offensively and really spreads you out.
So allow me to nitpick real quick, TJ.
Yeah.
Because I have some thoughts real quick.
Sure.
Could you make the claim that this is the best defense Washington will face all year and haven't faced a defense this good all year? All respect to Cal, they just went and got cooked by Bo Nix at home. Arizona, not so sure. Arizona State, not so sure. UCLA, how many points they give up to Oregon? Stanford, we know that defense is so-so. And then you got
Washington
Pitt State,
will face
Portland State, and Michigan State. I haven't seen a defense on this schedule, TJ, where I'm like, yeah, Penix went up against a dominant defense. Now, these next 2 weeks as they play Washington,
they'll be the
Oregon.
2 best defenses they play, probably.
Yeah. So that's all I'm saying is do you think there could be something there, or am I looking for too good of a stat?
Well, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I mean, you do need to be tested. You always need to be tested. So I do think the Huskies will be tested, but I think Oregon State will also be tested, right? They've had the benefit the last 3 weeks during this winning streak of playing some mediocre offenses at best, right? At best. Colorado not. Wazoo, probably mediocre. Stanford, mediocre.
Yeah.
Right? So it will be a barometer for who's going to be most ready, who probably utilized their bye week better. I don't know, that's probably an unfair argument, but it is going to be a test. But I think that defensive line is going to be very important this week.
And to go back,
go ahead. Sorry, I'm done.
Oh no, to go back to your question, I think I would not pick Oregon State in this game confidently
I would not.
If the weather wasn't a factor. Now, with that all being said, I think as of right now, I am going to pick Oregon State to win this game. I think they have a good chance to do so. But, I know some may disagree, or everyone's got an opinion, which is totally fine. But, my thing is, and I've maintained, TJ, for the last month, I think Oregon State's offensive ability is capped with Ben Gulbranson at quarterback.
I agree.
Now, because of that, I don't think they can get into a shootout like Fresno State style and be able to win. Everyone's quick to say, Chance Nolan, the turnover machine, this, that. People are real quick to forget that 2 weeks before that USC game, Chance Nolan takes you on a game-winning drive with $1.05 left on the clock. I know it's Fresno State, but leads you down and, helped you score 30-some points.
The game.
In that. Yeah, and not to say that I don't think Ben can't do that. I think he's growing every week, and I think the player we're going to see Friday is growing immensely from the player we saw come in Salt Lake City a month ago, and that's great. That's what experience will get you. But I think his upside as a passer is still limited. I think his pocket presence is still limited. I think his mobility aspect is still limited. Now, will he maybe be a little more safe with the football than Chance Nolan at times? I would agree with that. But at the same token, I would argue he's also more prone to making more of like, that's a freshman interception. Like we saw, I believe it was against Colorado that they reviewed and took the interception away where it hit the ground.
Probably, I think that's it.
Yeah, I believe you were next to me. I was just trying to make sure I wasn't remembering the Washington State game. But I believe it was the Colorado game. If not, it was the Washington State game. That was a really bad interception that got, saved by it unfortunately hitting the ground.
Yeah.
But, that's just my thought with Ben is I still think he's got potential. I think you can't not look at a 3-0 record as a starter. But I think you also have to look at it in context and go, Colorado's horrible. Washington State, Beavers played an absolutely tremendous defensive game plan.
Yeah.
And Stanford, I'm going to maintain, you had a couple players make epic plays that they will tell their children about one day. So
to win the game.
Yeah.
And here's what I'll say about that too. Especially in college football. Especially in college football.
Yeah.
Your record is not what you say you are. Your record is not what what's the right wording? It's like your record is not always who you are.
Right.
Right. It's not like a perfect stat, right? Because 7-1 Oregon pick a team. 7-1 USC and 7-1 Tennessee, are they equal? Probably not.
No.
Right?
No.
So just a tiny example, wishy-washy, et cetera. And we just essentially just broke down that argument right there. The other thing about this weather, so we talk about it balancing out to sort of neuter the Washington passing attack. Well,
good word.
I'm sort of, I know, right? That's what I have. That's what the journalism degree is for.
I know, right? Good word. Good word.
I look on the other side too. And I think this is going to sort of even out on the other side because where the real weakness is, I think for this Husky defense, I don't have the stat that I remember I saw, I think last week, that their biggest issue is explosive plays in the passing game. And overall, it's really left a huge dent on their passing defense. I mean, passing efficiency defense, they're 119. Passing yards allowed, they're 100th. Let's see, total defense, they're 60th. And third down defense, Brenden, 127th. That's almost last in the entire country in third down defense. That's pretty big, but I have a feeling a lot of that third down defense is through the air. And if it's, dumping half an inch to an inch of rain with 10 to 15 mile an hour winds on Montlake on Friday night, I wouldn't imagine the Beavers are going to let Ben Gobranson, go out there and chuck it 45 times to sort of attack the weakness. And if you look on the ground, I mean, that's where UW is good. That defensive line, especially their edge players, are really good. 21st in rushing, 28th in red zone defense, and they're 13th nationally in sacks as well. Something to keep an eye on. Although I thought it was kind of weird, Brenden. Their tackles for loss, they're 72nd in tackles for loss, which is middle of the pack. But if you go to sacks, they jump all the way up into the top 15. I thought that was a little curious.
That is a good point. I think that would kind of go along the lines of what you're seeing from that run defense, TJ, and that's something that I do want to make sure we make note of before we finish our thoughts on UW, and that's that Oregon State's run defense has been great this year. Top half the Pac-12. Washington's even better. Oregon State's allowing 120 yards on the ground per game. Excuse me. UW only 110. TJ, that is another like the. Like we talked about Washington's passing offense versus Oregon's passing defense. If the Beavers can't run the ball in this game, at the pool, man.
Oh, it's done.
Like it's done. I mean, that is the absolutely crucial key of this game is can that offensive line open up holes for Damian Martinez, Jam Griffin, Deshaun Fenwick, and, take that pressure off Ben because like you said, if they forcing Ben to throw in conditions, I just don't think their success rate's going to be great. But nevertheless, it's you play the games for a reason, and sometimes the way that it shakes out isn't what's predicted. But the over under has come down from 60 to 56 in this game too, TJ.
That's still pretty high.
So that's what 20, into the 20s and 30s, so per ish. So I'm curious, kind of to see how that all shakes out as well. But yeah, I mean, I think Oregon State's key to success in this is definitely going to be establishing that run game and limiting the big plays from Penix, and hopefully you'll get a little bit of aid from the weather in doing that.
Yeah, and they're going to need some turnovers in this game too. I mean,
Yes.
you can't understate it enough. Yeah, I mean, you just can't understate it enough every week. It was a big emphasis when we were talking to the coaches today, and they're like, yeah, the biggest thing about the rain, obviously, is the ball getting out of your hands because it's too wet and it's too slick. And just the amount of, swing on a game when the ball will bounce your way and is just, absolutely immense. If, Huskies muff a punt, they fumble a ball deep in their own territory. I mean, that's all that yardage. You don't have to lean on your quarterback to get. You only have to get, the X amount of yards into the end zone. Right. So that is something to think about. I'm also curious about, probably a Husky fan or someone who really watches the Huskies a little bit more in depth than I do would have an answer to this. How much of that Husky run defense is teams just not running because the Huskies are, scoring so many points and sort of jumping ahead of you? I don't know. It might be a little bit of both. It's kind of hard to keep that number down, even if you have a poor run defense and you're still ahead. But it's just something to think about.
Yeah. And, the other thing, just kind of going back to that and UW, I'm not, I was the one that, however many weeks ago when Washington raced out to their 4-0 start was kind of like, pump the brakes, and then they just proceeded to lose 2 straight road games to UCLA and Arizona State. I'm not convinced that UW isn't a team like we just talked about, TJ, who really, if their record was, or if their schedule was a little tougher, wouldn't be 5-4, or 5-3, or, maybe even 4-4, because again, I just want to reiterate, Kent State, horrible. Portland State, not good. Then number 11, Michigan State. We all know that team. Pretty overrated.
Definitely not the 11. That's why Stanford. They should abolish preseason rankings.
Right. Stanford, we know Stanford. I think UCLA is a good team. I'll give you that. They lost that game by 8, but, okay, there's the game. And then Arizona State, Arizona, and Cal. I just don't see a lot there. And I think you're going to find out a lot about UW when they play 2 ranked teams in 2 straight weeks. And, with that, I think Oregon State's, tough schedule. I think the Beavers are a little bit more battle tested. TJ, do you think I'm off there?
No, I don't think you're off. And really only one game where it felt like the Beavers would not win was that Utah game. I mean, that's, I think, the only game you look at and you're like, it's not happening today. But otherwise, I mean, you've really had some tough tests this year. I mean, I could start with Montana State, but the Beavers made that out to be, sort of a joke of a game where they nearly put up 70 points. So
that was even fun.
The reigning Montana State still had a very good year this year.
Can we go back to that? Can we go back to the 70 degrees and beautiful it was on that Montana State game? Like, I'm down, okay?
I'm ready.
Saying,
I missed the sunlight already, too, man. The lack of sunlight's already taken its toll.
Dude.
It's already taken its toll.
It's a real thing, dude.
But no, and then, Fresno State, you faced a really good Fresno State team on the road. The record really doesn't reflect it now, but that's because Jake Haener was out. And
he's back.
Haener took him back from, I think, a 10-point deficit with a minute left against San Diego State on Saturday and brought him back to win.
Back.
And then
good.
you faced,
you faced
the probably 2, I mean, this is an off-the-brand thought. Great year in the pack for quarterbacks. Man, oh man, it has been really good. Michael Penix is just one of them. But then you go Caleb Williams, Cam Rising back-to-back, and you had USC on the ropes, didn't win, sort of shot yourself in the foot against Utah, didn't win that game. But then you come out of it, and you're again played bad against Stanford, still won. Didn't play great on offense versus Wazoo, but your defense bailed you out, still won, and then you did what you should against Colorado and you beat the crap out of them. So, I agree, but this is going to be the toughest environment they'll play in, I think, this year.
Yeah.
Friday night, weather, tough passing offense. Is Michael Penix better than Cam Rising? I mean, it's probably up for debate. Probably each has their own strengths.
How well attended do you think the game will be on a Friday night? Does that help Oregon State not have a sellout crowd for UW?
It'll be a good crowd. I doubt it's going to sell out. It's so late. 7:30.
Yeah.
Come on.
Which with ESPN2 is really like a 7:40 kickoff, and you get
7:40 kickoff and a 3-hour and 45-minute game with all those commercials.
It's gonna be a long night. Dude, it'll be a late night. I'm happy at my hotel. It's just
you gonna stay up and call in, listen in? listening to the
I mean,
post-game show?
I mean, it might be live, calling in live from the Seattle press box, man. I mean,
there we go.
I'm happy I got my hotel on that side, which is not too far, a couple miles from the stadium, because it's gonna be late. But
where's your hotel at? Which one?
Kind of near the Space Needle. Kind of near the Space Needle. Yeah,
nice.
So it should be a good time.
Still a little far away, but that'll be good.
Yeah, but no, Keenan Punkocher and I will be up there for Beaver's Edge this weekend. So make sure to stay tuned for all the content that we'll be bringing. Obviously, TJ's glowing 8-0 projection is
it's on the
line.
I'm so torn, Brenden.
Yep,
I don't know.
yep.
I'm gonna have to really just sort of meditate on this.
You need
2
to zen
days.
in, dude. You need to zen in, and
I cannot. I need to. I'm not gonna lose a game this year. I'm gonna make that dedication to not do that.
TJ's been perfect. So again, we'll have the staff predictions, the injury reports, all that stuff on Thursday this week, obviously with the game being on Friday, late game. So everything's kind of moved up a little bit. Obviously, we're recording this podcast on a Tuesday as opposed to our normal Wednesday. But again, Oregon State's wrapped up their media availability for the week. They're locking things down, getting ready, obviously, for the matchup. So make sure to stay tuned to BeaversEdge.com, as we'll have complete coverage leading up to, during, and obviously a post game of that matchup. Going to be an exciting atmosphere. I'm stoked. It's, I'm no
disagreement. To go up. All my responsibilities are here in Corvallis, so I have to stay here. But a little bummed I don't get to go home and see this game. I grew up 2.5 miles from Husky Stadium. I've never been. Not once.
Oh man. Yeah, no, it's definitely, I went to old Husky Stadium when it had the track, back in the old days. And then I've been a couple times as a media member post. 2 things. I've been there on a sunny day. It is the greatest setting in college football that I've seen.
Without a doubt. With
my eyes. I've heard sailgating at Knoxville, Tennessee is pretty epic. Sailgating at Baylor, pretty epic too. But greatest.
But you can't. But at Baylor and Tennessee, you can't see the Cascade and the Olympic Mountains while you're, sitting on your boat with all the pine trees and the elevation and the clean air when it's not summer, and such. It's really like a late September, a September game with warm weather in Seattle for any sport is
unbeatable. And that's why I said, it's an awesome stadium. It's massive. Like I said, the press box is out of this world to this day, other than the LA Bowl. Shout out Stan Kroenke and his fine accommodations in the SoFi Stadium press box, which I don't think will ever be topped. But no one cares about my press box musings. But, it's UW's a good one, so it's definitely going to be fun. TJ, we got only a couple minutes left here on the podcast. I got to get your thoughts on a grievance. Beaver related, but not related to this specific thing. The NFL trade deadline was today, and our boy Brenden Cooks was left in Houston, was not traded. I personally very surprised at that. I thought he'd get moved to a contender,
surprising.
And I'm a little bummed for him. TJ, he was liking tweets from people this morning saying Brenden Cooks should go here. Brenden Cooks should go here.
And he put out the standard NFL receiver cryptic tweet, which always makes me laugh. I'm a little surprised he didn't get traded. I thought he could have gone to the Seahawks, could have gone to the Packers, etc. He's probably a little disappointed he didn't get traded, but I know they traded their they fired Jack Easterby, their president of football operations, last week. So that probably put their front office in a little bit of a flux. So interesting to see.
Yeah, apparently the sticking point was, Brenden Cooks makes a good amount of coin right now. So he's.
And the thing is, they could probably get just as much as they traded away. They got for DeAndre Hopkins for Brenden Cooks. You would think a 2nd-round pick, maybe.
Yeah, he'll get moved in the offseason. I certainly think after this little bit of awkwardness, Houston's not his long-term home, and I think Brandon's got a few more years of productive NFL football, but. Just the Beaver that was, out and about. His names were thrown out in trade news, and wanted to make sure to check in on that. But again, Brenden Cooks staying in Houston. But back to us ourselves, we'll be in Seattle this weekend. Beaver's Edge will be live. Make sure to keep it locked to BeaversEdge.com. As we mentioned, we'll have predictions, the injury report leading up to the game, and much, much more. So again, TJ, I want to thank you for jumping on the pod, man. A lot of fun as always, and looking forward to talking next week. We'll be talking about the atmospheric river and if there's still rain in my clothes. So we'll see.
Take good care of my home, Brenden.
Yeah, will do, man. Well, again, thanks for tuning into this edition of the Edge podcast. For TJ Mathewson, this is Brenden Slaughter signing off. We'll talk to you guys next week.